All right. Well, we are recording. Okay. Here we go. Well, I appreciate you guys all coming out. I'm Daniel Jacobowitz, the president of North Carolina Wildlife Federation, the Matthews chapter called Hawk. This group was started by some dedicated gardeners and wildlife enthusiasts 15 years ago. And we really dedicated to environmental conservation and education. And ultimately, the most important part of what we do is, aside from the education part, is to help people understand that what they do in their own backyards makes a big difference. So the National Wildlife Federation has this program called the Wildlife Habitat, Certified Wildlife Habitat. And, there's really only a couple of things that you need to have on your property to go get certified. That's food, water, shelter, and a place to raise young. So really the important aspect of it there is to go ahead and provide nature and wildlife the things they need to be able to sustain themselves. Quite honestly, not all that much different than the things we need. Of course, they don't need any internet access and that kind of thing. But aside from those four basic items, there's one other that I really encourage you, and that is very, very sparing use of any of the insecticides, herbicides, pesticides. Those have very lasting effects on nature. So the Matthews was certified about 14 years ago. Nope, 8 years ago. And it's a big win. We were only the 60th community in all of the nation to be certified as a community wildlife habitat. And what that means is a certain number of houses of worship, individual properties, schools, and businesses get certified as certified wildlife habitats to be able to create and get the community certification. It's a big win for the town of Matthews and us at Hawk. And really the only way to get that done is through volunteers. We're a volunteer organization. We'd love to have you be part of it. Come join us, help us figure out and choose the folks that are going to present to us on a monthly basis, help us do the Earth Day Festival, of course, this last year, just like everything else getting canceled. But we certainly look forward to not this coming up spring, but this summer, hopefully, but certainly fall, Kids in Nature Day. We could always use all the hands, as well as helping in any way. It doesn't necessarily need to be a big effort. It could be just a couple hours a month, or it could be joining us in a bigger contribution. So please do consider reaching out to us and letting us know how you might be able to help. And when we're doing in-person meetings again, always appreciate the folks that bring cookies and snacks to our meetings. Next month, it'll be our very first international speaker. Dr. Dunn is going to be joining us from Copenhagen to talk about deliciousness. So how we've all evolved with the notion of flavors and tastes and how deliciousness has really affected that. So that's going to be a really interesting presentation. Dr. Dunn has presented to us about 5 years ago on all the little microbes and critters that are on us and around us. Very fascinating and entertaining speaker. So don't miss that next month. Always appreciate our sponsors. William Subaru has helped us out for the last 5 years, being the sponsor of our Earth Day celebration. Both Birth House on the Greenway and Wildology have contributed to us for many years, and we do love them. So because tonight's going to be talking about trees, I thought I'd show you this beautiful Luna moth. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that moth is about the size of my palm, and it is hidden right now in its little chrysalis people call that a cocoon, um, in leaves on the ground. So if you mow all your leaves or blow all your leaves away, you're blowing this guy away. So if you let your leaves stay or gently put them in an area where you can let them pile up, you'll be gifted these beautiful Luna moths. The tree behind it also happens to be a sweet gum, which is not exactly everybody's favorite tree. Wonderful native tree. It's a host plant for these Luna moths. So again, since we're talking about trees, I thought I'd make a point to this is not the way to plant your tree. It should not look like a pencil stuck in the ground. It should have a nice flare at the bottom, and that root collar area is critical to go ahead and be above ground. So you see so many people mounding mulch and mounding dirt to make some sort of a big volcano, big dirt mound around their trees. That is not the way to do it. You take a tree that could last 150, 250 years, and it'll kill it in less than 40. So that is the way a tree root flare ought to look. So tonight we have a special guest, Kate Bolkin, the community tree educator for TreesCharlotte. She's going to join us and tell us all about some fun stuff. She provides tree-related lessons and tree walks to folks of all ages and backgrounds. She creates all of TreesCharlotte's educational content and planting plans. Currently, she's working on a tree care pilot program for low-income neighborhoods. I've been a TreesCharlotte fan for many years, and matter of fact, I'll go ahead and lift up here. You can see my vintage TreesCharlotte shirt. Been a tree master with them, helping lead tree plantings for a bunch of years, and absolutely love that organization. So I'm delighted to hear Kate talk to us tonight. There's one topic in particular that I'm really interested in, and that is the treasure tree program she's also going to cover for us tonight. So Kate, I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to you. See if you can go ahead and share your screen and turn that on. And I will go and sit back and enjoy your presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. We just go ahead and get this rolling. Okay, hi guys. Thanks for the great introduction. My name is Kate. I'm the tree educator at TreesCharlotte. I'm really excited to chat with you guys today a little bit more, not only about TreesCharlotte, what our great organization does, but also a little bit about how the tree canopy is doing in Charlotte. So ways that you can get involved protecting and preserving our tree canopy, some of the patterns we're seeing and why we're seeing those patterns. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing I want to do, probably what you maybe weren't expecting, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the tree history in Charlotte. Believe it or not, we do have a tree history, and it's not just that they randomly started popping up places. The tree history in Charlotte's really interesting, and it tells us a lot about the patterns of the tree canopy that we see today. So what you guys just need to know are the basics, which is back in the early 1900s, Charlotte civic leaders started building neighborhoods around the city center. A lot of this was really rich soils so that they knew lots of plants and trees would do well in these areas. So what they did was they teamed up with a man named John Noland. I don't know if that name rings a bell to any of you, but he was a really famous landscape architect. He did lots of parks and neighborhoods really all around the country, not only just in North Carolina. And his goal was very intentional about building a tree-filled city and a sweeping canopy all around Charlotte. So what they did, as you can see from this image here, is they would just go into nearby forested areas, dig up these just massive root balls, and they would just drag them into the city and plant them where they wanted to plant them. Here's another image of that. Again, they just would dig up these massive mature trees and plant them all around Charlotte. And that's why today in really well canopied areas of Charlotte, you can see that. A lot of these trees have a very rich history behind them. And that's part of the reason that Charlotte is so well tree canopied for a city of its size, which I'll get into in a little bit. But first, I wanted to ask you guys just to get a little bit of base information. Dan, maybe don't answer this question because I have a feeling you might know the answer. But what % of Charlotte is covered in tree canopy? So maybe you can just like drop it in the chat. I'll take a look to see how close you guys are. But tree canopy is roughly defined as if you were to take a bird's eye aerial image of the tree canopy, what % of that image would you just see the tops of trees? Let me take a look at the chat. Ooh. All right, some good answers, kind of all over the place. I see 62, 20, 33, 25, 40. All right, 60. Not bad. I'll give you guys maybe like 10 more seconds to answer that. 15. 45. All right, pretty solid answers. Asheville, you have about 44%. Cool. All right, well, the Asheville one was very close, and I saw someone said 45%, and that answer actually is correct. Hold on, let me see if it'll let me. There we go, 45%. At least that's what it was as of 2018. It might now be roughly around 44%. But yes, Charlotte has about 45% tree canopy. So you'd see 45% tops of trees if you took an overall aerial image of Charlotte. And that's actually pretty good when you compare it to other cities of a similar size, as you can kind of see by the graph. It is the goal not only of TreesCharlotte, but also of the city of Charlotte to get 50% tree canopy by the year 2050. And that's going to, and each percentage point is roughly 100,000 trees. So that's going to be about 500,000 trees, not including any loss. That may seem like quite a daunting number, and don't get me wrong, it is. But I'm actually pretty hopeful because, believe it or not, it wasn't that long ago that we were basically at that 50% number. In fact, it was less than a decade ago that we were. So what trend are we seeing overall? Well, TreesCharlotte got some really smart people from the University of Vermont, and they created a tree canopy study for us. And in this tree canopy study, they found that in the 6-year period from 2012 to 2018, we have a net loss of 4% canopy. This is obviously not the direction that we want to be going in, but to me, it seems kind of almost hopeful because this 50% goal wasn't something that, was in the distant past. It really was something that was in the very near past, and I think it's something that is definitely achievable. Now, even though we are going in a negative direction when it comes to tree canopy, that isn't to say that the work that TreesCharlotte and the city and all tree planting entities are doing is completely useless, because actually, according to that study, there was an 8% loss in tree canopy in that 6-year period. However, there was also a 4% gain in tree canopy. So definitely the work that we're doing still has an impact. However, all we're doing is slowing the decline rather than adding trees to our canopy or staying stagnant. So it's still good that we're doing what we're doing, because we would probably be around 40% right now instead of that 45 if it weren't for our work. But again, we want to reverse the trend that we're seeing right now. And just to give you guys a little bit of a visual, we are losing roughly 3 football fields per day of tree canopy just in Charlotte alone, which is certainly a significant amount. So you might be thinking, why are we losing so much canopy? What's happening? Well, there's a number of reasons, and they kind of all feed into one another. The first that's kind of a standalone reason is growth and development, and that accounts for about 1/3 of the tree loss. This is probably the first thing to pop into your head when you thought about why we're losing so many trees, and you would be right. Charlotte is the 5th fastest growing city right now, roughly, in the United States. So because of that, you're seeing a lot more condos, apartments, developments popping up all over the city. And we're definitely experiencing that urban sprawl and losing a lot of trees that way. Right now, the city of Charlotte only requires developers to replant between 10 and 15% of the trees that they remove on at site, so on their property. So we are just losing large amount of trees from growth and development on a commercial level and on an individual level. A lot of people are choosing to renovate or redo their homes and taking out trees that way as well. Then the other reason, which accounts for about the remaining 2/3, all play off of one another. The big reason, though, is the age of trees. So part of the reason I really wanted you guys to understand that history of Charlotte's tree canopy is to see that in our very impressively canopied areas, those trees are old. They are 80, 90, even over 100-year-old trees. And unfortunately, because they're all around that same age, they're all dying at the same time. So we're working really hard to try to replace that aging canopy that we are seeing as they're coming down just from natural mortality. Another one is a lot of our trees are becoming vulnerable to pests and diseases. We're seeing a lot more invasive pests and diseases like Dutch elm disease, emerald ash borer, even though it's native southern pine beetle has certainly become an issue. So we're trying to combat all of those things as well. And again, as a tree is older, it has a weaker defense mechanisms against those pests and diseases. So something we're very conscious about in TreesCharlotte is to get a good amount of species diversity planted. That way you kind of have almost like an insurance policy. So if some sort of disease were to come out and wipe out the entirety of one species, if you have that diversity, it's not gonna have as severe of an impact. We also have storms. Studies suggest that with the effects of climate change, we're gonna be seeing a lot more frequent and severe storms. And just like with people, where you lose bone strength and you lose bone density as you get older, trees work the exact same way. They get a lot weaker as they get older. So as we're having more severe storms plus old trees, that means a lot more trees coming down than if those trees were, say, 40, 50 years old, middle-aged trees where they're nice and strong at that age. And finally, we have inferior tree care. You know, when a branch comes down on your car, even your house, or even near your house, you're going to associate kind of a negative experience with your trees. And maybe instead of pruning or getting some sort of treatment, you're going to jump straight to removal. Not to mention that tree care, especially mature tree care, gets really pricey and really expensive. And that's part of the reason we're trying to pilot a tree care program for low-income communities where we could help, you know, cover some of those costs. But overall, we see a lot of people just jumping straight to removal when they don't have to remove a tree quite yet, or if they remove the tree, they're not choosing to replace it because, again, they associate a negative experience with the tree. So we really want to change the culture around trees and show people that they're super great and super important so that people can maybe invest more time and effort into their tree care instead of just jumping straight to removal. So I just wanted to show you guys what it kind of looks like on a map when we see some of these effects of tree loss. So this one is pretty easy to see. It's Steel Creek 8 years apart, and it just shows you commercial development. Again, super easy to spot, large swatch of forest that was taken out for a development. This is almost easier on us as an organization because we can say, okay, here's a nice little area that had a lot of trees taken out, so we can pinpoint that area and get a planting event done here or get a tree store done here, because we can say to them, hey, you guys took out a lot of trees while you're developing your neighborhood, so let's get as many trees planted in your neighborhood to mitigate some of that loss. Super clear cut, anyone can see it. However, there is another kind of development that's a lot sneakier and it's a lot harder for us to pinpoint on a larger scale, which is something like this. I think this was taken in, I believe, Myers Park, but it was someone who decided, and it looks like their neighbors did the same thing, to renovate their home. And in the process, they took out their home's trees. Although it doesn't seem like a big deal, they maybe took out 2 or 3 trees. When you have thousands of people who have the same idea, as you can imagine, that relates to thousands of trees being taken down. It's a lot harder for us to kind of manage this because it's going to look very scattered and just kind of harder for us to accumulate data on things like that. But that definitely is something that is as of a concern as well. So I'm really glad that I get to talk to you guys today. So hopefully if you maybe know a neighbor or a friend who's considered renovating their home, maybe just kind of talk to them and see like, hey, do you think you could work around your mature trees, because they're super great and have tons of benefits, which I'll get into in a little bit. So that's kind of what that looks like as well, kind of the sneakier forms of development that you might not think of. And then finally, this is what it kind of looks like on just a satellite map level, seeing the amount of aging canopy and natural, I say natural with air quotes, because is it natural if we have more storms caused by anthropogenic climate change? That's a whole debate just in itself. But these more, I guess, what one would call natural deaths, again, harder to pinpoint, very scattered all over the place. However, you might, something people don't think about as often, but you guys might know it, is we actually don't see an even amount of tree canopy throughout Charlotte. There are specific patterns we see, and this is one that TreesCharlotte and myself are very passionate about. This slide kind of talks about, and what I wanted to bring attention, the lack of tree canopy in primarily underserved neighborhoods of color. The data is a little bit misleading, because we're actually seeing the highest amount of loss in wealthy white neighborhoods. And the reason for that are kind of two reasons. One, you need a lot of tree canopy in order to have a lot of tree canopy loss. So these neighborhoods are seeing a lot of loss because they had an early investment of trees. With that history that I talked about before, a lot of city developers focused on these neighborhoods and getting nice, beautiful tree canopy that is now just aging out and dying because of that. And a lot more development also happens on those areas. So we're seeing net loss take place primarily in those neighborhoods. However, there is the least amount of tree canopy overall in primarily underserved and primarily Black communities, just because they didn't have as much initial tree investment as wealthier white neighborhoods. So that's definitely something that TreesCharlotte is kind of facing the demand and pull on both ends, because we really want to get trees planted where trees have historically not been planted, but we're also really trying to keep up with the mass amounts of tree loss we're seeing in other neighborhoods as well. I definitely recommend reading the article on the right. It's really, really interesting. And the maps show the difference. If you were to have a quarter-mile walk from your house, how much tree canopy you'd see. It's comparing historic West End and South Charlotte. And as you can see, there is a striking difference. In fact, one thing that we found was, if you took a look at the historic redlining map of Charlotte and the tree coverage map of Charlotte, the lack of trees in the points of Charlotte almost directly line up to historically redlined zones. So trees are certainly an equity and a social justice issue as well as environmental. So all that being said, I've talked about why we're seeing a decrease in canopy, where we're seeing a loss in canopy, but what's the point? What's the point in talking about all of this? Well, I think the point is because trees are really, really important. They're really great to have in an urban landscape. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but I bet you guys are really smart and you know lots about wildlife. So I wanted to kind of hear your answers first as to why having trees is super important, especially why having trees in an urban environment especially is really important. So if you wanted to drop that in the chat, I'd love to see your answers. I don't know why it's not coming up. And then I'll reveal some of them. But I know you guys can answer quite a bit of them. There we go. Nesting for birds and squirrels. Yes.
Kate, right before, while we're seeing everybody type in their suggestions here, I thought I'd remind everybody to use the Q&A feature when Kate's finished up with her presentation. We'll have a bunch of questions from everybody. So while she's talking, if you want a little bit more clarification, go ahead and toss a good question in there in that Q&A section.
Yeah, all these answers are awesome, by the way. Love that birds was the first one. I love birds. Cool temperature, prevent erosion. I have yet to see a wrong answer. Well done. Give us joy. Absolutely. Aesthetics are important. Shade wildlife habitat. Perfect. These are all awesome answers, guys. Give you guys like 5 more seconds, just in case, you know. Cool. Yeah, those are all very correct. Good job, you guys. Let me try to, there we go. This is just a list, and I'm sure I'm missing tons of things of some of the reasons why Charlotte's urban forest is so, so, so important. I saw definitely clean air in there. Of course, we all think of trees as being an awesome carbon sink and trapping a lot of greenhouse gases, which helps mitigate climate change, which is super important. But something else trees do is they also purify the air from other pollutants such as like ozone, nitrogen, like nitrous oxides, those kinds of things. In fact, I believe it was a study in New York basically showed that if you have an urban park with ample tree cover, that could reduce street level particulates by up to 60%, which is definitely significant because it's those kind of little gritty street level particulates that can cause and exacerbate asthma and other respiratory issues. I feel like it's very appropriate now because now we are learning lung health in the time of COVID is super important. So we want to make sure our air is as clean as possible. Someone said it prevents erosion. Yes, absolutely. It definitely does. I feel like that ties into reducing storm water runoff. You're going to have a lot less of those like mudslides. It captures tons of water and prevents flooding. And almost all of these have monetary values as well. And this is just in Charlotte alone. They enhance physical health, again, by cleaning our air and cleaning our water and keeping our communities cool, but it also enhances mental health. Studies showed that people who worked with a view of trees ended up being more focused and more productive, but also feeling more calm and less stressed. They also did a study with kids, and again, kids who played in a playground that was filled with trees had a lot easier time focusing during school hours than if they were to play in just a concrete jungle gym. So it definitely has an effect on our mental health as well. It cools down streets and parking lots. I know it's chilly out today, but think about how many times in the summer you're going into a parking lot and you always choose the spot that's under the tree. You always choose a shady spot because really trees can reduce just the general air temperature by up to 25 degrees, which is definitely significant. Lots of people said it reduces energy costs, which is absolutely true. I think this is super important for twofold important, I guess. One, I mean, for economic purposes, and two, if you're keeping your AC off for longer, you're also contributing less to, again, greenhouse gas emissions and reducing your effect on climate change by having that natural shade and less AC pumping. It increases property values because just trees are beautiful and has those energy saving properties. Most of you guys said stuff about wildlife, which I probably should have guessed. You are absolutely correct. Trees are home to, you know, thousands and thousands of different species of wildlife. They provide food, not only for wildlife, but also for us as well. And overall, it just makes the city really beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Charlotte's known as the city of trees, and I just feel like we get so much of our identity and so much of our Charlotte pride from having an ample tree canopy. So without it, I feel like we would definitely lose that sense of community that we have around our trees. So with that, it's time for me to talk about what I do at TreesCharlotte and our TreesCharlotte mission, and also how you guys can get involved, because we would love for you guys to get as involved as possible. We love our volunteers. So in short, TreesCharlotte goal is to expand and diversify our urban forest, and that's primarily on private property. We are a public-private nonprofit. So what that means is we are partnered with the city, which is super awesome, because what they noticed about 10 years ago is we're losing 65% of our tree canopy on private property. And the city can't do anything about that. The city takes care of trees in right-of-ways, street trees, any trees on public properties. This is for the city. They can't do anything about trees on private property. And that's where we come in. So on a physical level, our goal is to get as many trees in the ground on private property as possible. And that is done through tree planting events and also tree giveaway events. But overall, our mission is a little bit more than that. We want to promote better tree care, and we want to promote a positive culture around trees and their benefits. As I kind of mentioned earlier, even though getting trees in the ground is super great and super important, we're facing a lot of larger kind of big picture issues, which is preventing us from planting at the same rate that they're taking trees out. They're taking trees out faster than we can get them in the ground and give them away to individual homeowners. So we believe if we get really passionate people like you guys and all our volunteers and just spread the word about how great trees are and how important they are to our community, then we can get more, we can rally behind bigger changes in terms of tree canopy. So that includes, holding developers accountable for the trees that they take out and demanding that they plant more than the required, getting better tree legislation through the city of Charlotte, things like that, because that I believe will in turn create the bigger changes that we want to see. But right now, on a physical level, we want to get trees in the ground. Here's just a little bit of a breakdown about how that's done. This is actually kind of an old number. This was before our fall 2020 season, so we're probably closer to 40,000 containerized trees that have gone in the ground and have been given away since we started. And then that doesn't even count seedlings. We also give away seedlings as well. The majority of these go away through our Neighborhoods project, where basically we'll do a tree planting in the common spaces of different neighborhoods. And then we'll usually pair that with a tree giveaway or something, or sometimes we call them like a tree store event. And that could be either for just the neighborhood that we're planting the trees in. Sometimes they're a bit bigger and they're called zip code tree stores. Well, we'll do a tree store for 3 or 4 different zip codes around the area. And then our biggest one, we have about 2 or 3 per year. We have citywide tree stores where anyone within the city limits of Charlotte can come and get up to about sometimes 2 to 3 trees per household. And right now with COVID, they're all drive-through, super safe. You register online. We really do love our tree stores. The next biggest portion is schools. Since we started, we have paired with over 60 CMS schools to get trees planted in those areas. In fact, our biggest tree planting, I wasn't here for it, but our biggest tree planting was at a school. And we did, I think it was like 750 trees in one day, which I find just very, very impressive. And then we also just do, churches and other faith campuses. Sometimes we'll even do orchards at churches to help solve for some food insecurity issues. We'll pair with Habitat for Humanity to take care of housing projects. We'll pair with Parks and Rec. And then finally, we do stewardship events where we'll go back and service trees that we had planted in the past. And that's usually, we'll just go back and remulch them and things like that. So that's just an overview of what we do in terms of that. And now, this is probably going to be Dan's favorite part. I wanted to quickly talk to you guys about our Treasure Tree program. This is a new program, somewhat new program that we started. Just a little bit of background. Treasure Trees was actually started in the late 80s by some people who were really passionate about Charlotte's tree canopy and wanted to honor some of our largest and oldest trees in the Charlotte kind of Mecklenburg area. They originally documented 123 treasure trees, and then the program kind of died out around 2000, 2001. But recently, TreesCharlotte, as well as some other people who are really passionate about trees, kind of revamped the program again. We wanted to bring it back. And here we are. Now we're starting to bring back the Treasure Tree program. So what we did is on our TreesCharlotte website, there's a Treasure Trees tab, and we have all the stories and some photos of the original 123 treasure trees that were originally documented. Some of them are still there, some of them aren't. But you could definitely, I'd recommend going out and seeing some of them because they are massive and they are very, very impressive. We also have self-guided walking and biking tours that hit a lot of the treasure trees, as you can see in the upper left corner. So I definitely recommend checking out that site too. You can read about some of the treasure trees. A lot of them have really cool stories. I think one of them was struck by lightning twice on the same day, like 3 years apart, and still lived. Some of these trees are just really, really crazy, and they're really cool too. But most importantly, we'd like you guys to get involved because you can submit a tree to be considered a treasure tree. So if you know of a tree that is really, really big or really old that you think is impressive, you can nominate this tree to be a treasure tree by just going on our site and filling out a form. Once we get in some more nominations, we'll have people from our treasure tree committee go out and take a look and take some more measurements of the tree, and then it might qualify for treasure tree status, where it'll get this cute little tag. It'll get a whole page and bio and pictures about it and everything like that. So that's where we are right now in the treasure tree program. It's still in the early stages, and we're actually working with the city to hopefully, fingers crossed, get special protection for these treasure trees because they are quite impressive, and more mature trees do a lot more in terms of water filtration, cleaning the air, more shade, all of that great stuff. So we want to honor some of our senior trees out there. And last thing is I just want to tell you guys how you guys can get involved in TreesCharlotte. The most common way is just to come and volunteer at our events. Our events are nearly every Saturday morning from October through March, which is the planting season. It's super, super easy. No experience is required right now. It's very COVID safe. It's obviously all outside. We wear masks, we social distance. You've, again, no experience required. One of our awesome tree masters, which includes Dan, will show you exactly what to do and will help you out with the tree planting process. We provide all the tools, mulch, everything. And it's also very kid friendly. So definitely it can be a family event as well. Kids love to help out. You can document treasure trees like I just talked about. Or if you want to get even more involved with TreesCharlotte, you become a tree master or a tree ambassador, which are basically like our super volunteers, and you'll get special training on that. And then with experience, you can eventually train all the other just kind of day-to-day volunteers who come day of, and then just kind of help lead and facilitate tree plantings. And you get really cool merch if you do that. And I believe that's all I have. Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna take a look at some of your questions if you have any. Oh my goodness.
So we've had a couple of really good questions.
Yeah.
I had a couple of folks text me directly and not use the QA. That's fine. So, one of the really great questions that came in is that, are there any species of trees to avoid planting in our areas? I know we worry about invasive plants. What about trees? I've got a
Yes.
list. I don't know if you do, Kate.
Oh yeah. I mean, Dan, I'm sure you have a list. There are absolutely invasive trees. The one that comes to mind is the most popular is the mimosa tree. Their seeds just spread like wildfire, and they are definitely highly invasive. In terms of TreesCharlotte trees, we do not give out any trees that are invasive or harmful in any way. All of our trees are either native or have been naturalized to the area. None of the ones that we give away or that we plant are invasive or harmful in any way. Dan, do you want to list some more? Some more than just the mimosa? There's so many.
One of the big ones that the city of Charlotte years ago, back in '89.
Oh, Bradford pear.
Yeah, Bradford pears. They were giving them away, and now the city of Charlotte is cutting them all down, getting rid of them.
Don't do it. They're a mess. I won't even get into why they're a mess, but they're a mess. Don't do it.
It's interesting. The invasive trees that we have here are usually from Asia, Europe, because we have a very similar climate. Of course, our trees that get introduced there, they're invasive over there. So, black locust is a real pain in Europe and Asia. It's a native tree here. White poplar, silver poplar is also an Asian plant here. It is very invasive. We've got tulip poplars, which are wonderful native trees.
Love them. Beautiful.
But the Asian version, which is the white poplar and the silver poplar, very difficult for us. Chinese sumac is also a very invasive tree here in the States. So great question talking about invasive plants. So if you see any other country or continent listed in a tree's name, I would say don't plant it. Not here, at least.
Yeah, try to avoid it if you can. Sometimes with urban trees, it gets tricky because they have very different conditions than planting a tree in the forest. You need to have a tree that is more pollution tolerant, might be more tolerant of compact soils, of, road debris, things like that. So sometimes, we try to plant native as much as we can, but sometimes doing a naturalized tree is the best way to go because we want the highest chance of survival for that tree. But again, nothing harmful. Yeah, because that wouldn't be good. The second one is, can we control what species of trees developers plant? Call them. I'm not quite sure. Something that we're actually dealing with a little bit, again, going back to the species diversity thing, is a lot of developers like the look of having, one single red maple in everybody's front yard, or something along those lines, which again, we want to get more of a diversity in there. So I'm not quite sure. I know the developers have to choose from, I believe, a list that the city has, but I'm not sure if we can control what they plant. That's definitely something I'll look into for you. I should look into that too, but I don't think so, unfortunately. How many people are currently involved? So on staff, there's only 5 of us. We're pretty small. In terms of volunteers for an event, that completely varies based on the size of the event. So we roughly have, for example, for a tree planting, we like to have about half the amount of volunteers as trees we are planting, so that everyone could at least do 2, sometimes 3 trees. So if that's, obviously, if we're doing an event of 100 trees, which is actually kind of on the smaller side for us, we like to maybe have between like 30 and 50 volunteers for an event of that size. And then we also have our tree masters, and we'll have usually, again, depending on the size, a couple tree masters per each event. But you can definitely take a look at our event calendar. We don't have that many, believe it or not, plantings for this spring. We have a lot more tree stores, but come next fall, we're going to have a ton of plantings because we've actually had to cancel some of them with the new recommended COVID guidelines. But that just means that our fall is going to be jam-packed with tons of really big events that will definitely need lots and lots and lots of volunteers for. So definitely awesome to get involved.
Kate, there was a question if you could go back to the slide, the volunteer information slide that you have.
Yeah.
There was a question over here asking if gumball trees are native, and that is a sweet gum tree, actually very much a native tree. I know there's a love-hate relationship with those. Above your driveway or above your walkway or deck, not exactly the ideal spot. It's a good reminder of the right tree in the right place. You don't want to put an oak tree underneath power lines because eventually those are going to just get hacked away by Duke Power and the other utilities. But oak trees are great in the right place, just like a sweet gum tree is.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely a pain in the butt to deal with, but they're native and lots of wildlife like them. So if you have the space for it, if you don't mind little gumballs, then by all means, go ahead. One of our favorite trees, actually, that a lot of people, just because the name is confusing, is called a black gum or black tupelo, which is an amazing tree because it is like gorgeous fall color. It's nice and medium sized, so it doesn't get too big. It's like jammed full of nectar. So like I know bees and pollinators really like it. I really like the black gum tree, but a lot of people are like, oh no, like is that like the sweet gum? Does it have the little spiky things that fall off? I'm like, no, unrelated, just bad name. But yeah, the sweet gum, the gumballs are native. So our funding,
there's a question about where your funding comes from.
Yeah, so our funding is primarily from donations as well as grants. We definitely apply to quite a few grants. Yeah, a lot of it is very much donation based, and actually depending on the overall kind of average home value of a neighborhood, sometimes we will charge $10 per tree for a tree store or for a planting. I believe that if a neighborhood qualifies for at least the $10,000 city grant, and I believe that number is the average house, if it's less than 180K for the average house in that neighborhood, then they qualify for free trees. If they're over that, it is $10 per tree, but that is still like a tiny fraction of what you get a tree for at a, Home Depot or Lowe's. Usually those are like, $80, $100. So, but yeah, mostly grants and donations.
Madison had mentioned that North Carolina Wildlife Federation has partnered with TreesCharlotte for a few plantings, and hope we can
Yeah.
do more in the future. I know that Mary with Great Outdoors University would set up and teach mostly families and children, because of the tree plantings with TreesCharlotte, about right tree in the right place, and a lot of great biology-based stuff. So that's with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation as well.
Yeah, we love our partners. We love it.
Here's a good one. There was Angie had mentioned that I used an interesting word choice of hacked when describing Duke Power. What can be done to encourage more humane mass trimming? Duke really did just hack the trees under the power lines, I imagine, where she was in 2019, and they're still recovering.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, go ahead, Kate.
Oh no, yeah, that's definitely a big issue. We even see that with the city, where they'll just kind of come in with a large kind of just like saw and just try to clear, the trees away from the power lines, from the streets when trucks need to pass, and just because it is the most efficient way for them to do it in the shortest period of time. So that's definitely something that you should definitely, I guess, bring up. It's kind of hard to control, but what we want to advocate for is kind of like Dan said, right tree, right place. We find it very unwise to plant a 40-foot or 30-foot tall tree under a 25-foot power line and then just try to like keep topping it. The most ideal thing is to encourage entities like Duke Power to choose trees that will fit the space, the allocated space that they have. So they don't have to go in and just start like kind of cutting away at these trees, because they don't grow out as full or as well, and it's just not good overall. Yeah, I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add to that. Dan is one of our most knowledgeable tree masters, if you couldn't already tell. I turn to him most of the time.
Thanks, Kate. I appreciate that. There was an interesting question going back to solutions to kudzu that seem to be widespread around North Carolina, certainly the Southeast in particular, just swallowing forests whole. Another plant from Asia that we brought here, Americans brought that plant here, as many others, like Chinese wisteria is another one that kind of does a very similar thing, very aggressive grower and just swallows and kills trees. You familiar with solutions for that, Kate?
I really don't. We've lots of one of the cool things about being partnered with the city is we have a lot of arborists kind of at our disposal, and it's just tough, like we just recommend getting landscapers to try to cut back as much as possible, but they're notoriously weedy for a reason. So I personally, I wish I had the answers. I wish I had some sort of special trick that no one has thought of or tried yet, but I personally don't. I'd say, keeping your tree as healthy as possible will help prevent, some vines from encroaching onto it. But yeah, sorry.
They're tough ones. They're really tough to control. There's no question about that. Unfortunately, a lot of these invasives really affect our properties that are not maintained, right? I mean, if you think about forest area, places that aren't our own property. So, not buying these plants to begin with, because guess what? You can still buy Bradford pears. You can still buy uh, Chinese wisteria, English ivy, all those
Yep.
plants that really are just so invasive, and they escape your backyard. So not buying them at the big box stores is
Mhm.
critical. First step, that's for sure.
Yep. Don't plant on top of your sewer line. Yes, don't.
Yeah, they have a right
Uh,
of way, which is also they have a right of way on the keep the power lines and
mhm.
utility lines clear. So if
Yep.
they're growing into it, unfortunately, they do indeed hack into it. Their job's not to remove the whole tree; it's just to get it off of their lines. So a little off topic. Kathy had mentioned her cousin from Oklahoma sent her an article regarding the fact that they're expecting a huge population of cicadas this year. What can we do to protect our trees from cicadas? And I've got the best solution is
Yeah.
um, do encourage snakes in your yards. Amazingly enough, copperheads love to eat cicadas, and they will climb up a tree a little bit to eat those cicadas as they're, coming out of their shell when they're molting, and they're not quite a shell, but they're exoskeleton. So frogs, birds. The birds are going to be very, very happy this year with all those cicadas. You're going to see a lot of big, fat, happy birds this year with those cicadas. So, not spraying is really important because those birds, you don't want to feed them poisonous cicadas. You want to go ahead and let them munch down on them and then provide one of those big four items, food, for them, and they'll make a whole lot more babies this year. So we're going to have a lot more birds, hopefully.
Mhm.
There's another question for you, Kate. Do you guys partner with Girl Scouts or any other organizations?
Absolutely. We have had Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts of all kinds at our planting events. We actually get quite a bit of groups. We'll have, Rotary clubs. We'll have, groups from even like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, really things like that. A lot of people like to come in groups. It's definitely like a really great opportunity to get service hours or to do kind of a group outing together, especially during this time of COVID. So we absolutely do partner with them in terms of getting them out to volunteer. And in fact, I'll go. I mean, they've all been over Zoom so far, but I'll often do talks to girl or boy scouts, really of all ages. And I find they're the best groups to talk to. They're very sweet and engaged. So we try to do as much work with them as possible. I see
Donna had,
like,
oh, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, I just saw one that was like about any seminars or demonstrations to teach how to propagate from seeds or acorns. So really, I just find like, the internet really is your best bet. One thing to know about propagating from seeds is it's either best to plant them if you can in the fall, but to have a little bit better of a chance, they usually need to undergo a period of stratification, which is just basically kind of giving the seed the dormancy conditions that it would experience in the wild. And different species are very different. And that's usually a cold period of usually kind of around like 40-ish degrees. Like I think black gum needs 2 to 3 months, and different trees need about 4 months. Some trees only need 2 months. So definitely look into the species that it needs, the species requirements. Also, some stratification is more moist, some of it's more dry. So just make sure to do your research in terms of that. And once that stratification period is over, you should be good to propagate via seeds. Some of them are a bit easier. Like I know certain species of oak don't require that stratification period. I think white oak is one. I know post oak is one, and they don't actually require that period. That's why sometimes Aaron, who's one of our city arborists, will go out with school kids and take oak acorns and just kind of scatter them around. Obviously, they expect most of them won't survive, but they are a relatively quick to propagate and pretty easy because they don't require that kind of that hands-on period.
Donna
So,
mentions a great post here. She said, rent a goat. They love kudzu. Matter of fact, I forgot a couple of years
yes,
back,
those are great.
we had a couple folks who had a farm here in town. They've since moved up to Roanoke, but they rented goats. So if you had English ivy in your backyard, and boy, those goats love, particularly they love poison ivy. They will fight each other for the poison ivy. So that's another reason not to pet a goat on the face. But that's a great suggestion, Donna. Appreciate that
That's
one.
funny.
Ginger asked if you've had any experience or thoughts on having a tree company put strong wire between two large limbs for support. Certainly, arborists will go ahead and support trees that way and keep them from splitting. But absolutely having an experienced arborist, not just someone with a chainsaw and a tree company, but a true certified arborist to do that kind of work will certainly have your tree last a whole lot longer.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And most certified arborists are very against topping, which basically is what it sounds like. It's where you just cut off the top of the tree to prevent it from growing any taller. Most arborists, I'd say at least all of the ones I've met, just hate that practice, which they should. It's a really bad practice. So by getting a certified arborist to take care of projects like that, I think you're going to get better practices.
Yeah, no doubt. Pruning is critical to have someone who knows how tree biology and anatomy works. Ginger also went ahead and wanted to throw a shout out to Jen Rothacker over at TreesCharlotte. We all love Jen as well.
You can't not love Jen. Absolutely. Someone asked where we get our trees and our seedlings and if we have a greenhouse or nursery. So we do not have a greenhouse or nursery. We get our trees, which are typically in 7-gallon containers, meaning they're usually about 2 or 3 years old, and they range from, I'd say, 6 to 10, 11 feet tall. So they're nice because they're bigger than like a tiny little sapling, but they're not so big that you can't get it in your car and take it home. And we work with 3 different nurseries around the North Carolina area, and they source our trees for us. For the seedlings, we actually get them from a nursery in Georgia. And kind of what I was talking about with that period of stratification, they are kept in a freezer. So another benefit of working with the city, a few years ago, they bought us a super nice, awesome state-of-the-art freezer where we keep our seedlings in. And we just got them a few weeks ago. We have about 5,000 of them right now that we're looking to start giving away soon.
That's always nice. There was a funny question that what is the trick to getting registered for a tree giveaway? Today's registration sold out very quickly.
I know. It sold out in 20 minutes, guys. It was 270 trees. It sold out in 20 minutes. You just got to be you really got to be on it. That's actually something we're trying to work through right now. Thankfully, that isn't our only citywide tree store that we will be having. We're having another one last weekend of March, which will be the 27th. And the day before that is our first timers tree store, which will be a little bit less of a crowd. So if you haven't gotten trees from us before, you qualify for that one. And I would maybe recommend trying that one first, because again, it's going to be a smaller crowd. And if not, try the other citywide tree store. There's going to be a lot of trees for that one, a lot more than this one. My guess is that at least 400 trees are going to be at that one. So just get on it. I know, I'm so sorry. It was insane. Even today, I was like, oh, I should tell them about our citywide tree store. And then I got a message from Jen. It was like, it's sold out. Don't tell them about it. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Right. There's plenty
People love trees. It's a good problem to have.
That's exactly right. That's a great problem to have, that we have that many people very eager to get ahead and get trees and get them into the ground here locally. Donna did ask if if the trees that we plant are pesticide free from the growers.
That's a good question. I'm actually not quite sure about that. Um, they are, I know, because they are relatively young trees. That's actually a good question. That's actually a really good question. I actually don't know if they're pesticide free.
Well, I got to thank
I
you
don't think
very
so.
much
Yeah.
for everything that you shared with us tonight. The biggest piece that I got to encourage folks not only to volunteer with Trees Charlotte, whether coming out and planting a couple of trees or helping them out, helping unload when there's 300-400 trees at a time to unload from the growers, but also donating and buying a tree to memorialize somebody or some event in your life. It's a great opportunity to plant a tree for, and
Yep.
quite honestly, just planting trees. So we thank everybody for coming out. Kate, thanks for
Yeah.
answering all these great questions and
Of
sharing
course.
the
And
event.
my email is just right there at the bottom. It's just kate@treecharlotte.org. So if you think of something in an hour or next week or whenever that you want to ask me, I love answering questions over email. And that way too, I can maybe do a little bit of research if I'm not quite sure about it. I'll quickly email Dan, be like, tell him to help me out.
Thanks again, Kate. We appreciate it. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody, and all the
Thanks,
best
guys.
in doing the right thing ecologically. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Make sure I got everyone.